So thank you for joining me. Do you want to start by kind of giving like an introduction to yourself for like the ones who may not know much about you? Or...
Yeah, well, I'm Sean Conway, and I'm an non-professional endurance sportsman. I think people call me an adventurer, and I guess that's kind of what I get classed in as. But non-professional endurance sportsman who likes to try and break world records. That kind of gets me out of bed each day.
So I was looking at your website, and you've kind of gotten up to quite a lot of like adventures and that. How do you find all the time to kind of do all of it?
Well, it's my job.
Yeah,
In a nutshell, it didn't used to be my job. I used to be a school portrait photographer, so I didn't have much time to spend outdoors back then. But now this is what I do. So
yeah,
outside of being a dad and having a small child running around the place, I got to get out there and train to try
yeah.
and win basically at the records I conjure up in my over imaginative brain.
Yeah, because like you've meant broken a couple world records. What was it like when you kind of found out you had achieved them?
Oh, sorry, you lost the internet there.
Um, because you've broken a couple world records. What was it like when you found out you'd achieved them?
Well, it's weird. On a lot of the records that I've broken, you pretty much know you've got the record
Yeah,
probably a couple of days before you get to the end, because most of my records are pretty long.
yeah,
The shortest record I've ever done is 25 days. And I knew probably 2 days before the end I was going to break it. And other records, I've sort of known that I was going to break them maybe weeks before even, because I was sort of doing well. It was a distance record, for example. And once you go past the previous record, you've got the record anyway. And that, for me, could have been in my world's longest triathlon record. That was a month before I got to the end. I'd broken the record. So, yeah, you it's nice because I kind of get a few days to sort of think about it really, and let it settle in. Um, and then, to be honest, I'm always kind of just thinking about the next thing. I kind of don't dwell too much on the record I've just done. I enjoy writing the book about it,
yeah,
and that gets me excited. But I move on to something new pretty quickly, to be honest.
yeah. So do you have any like favourite adventures you've been on or places you've been or?
Favorite? Well, they've mostly been pretty miserable, if I'm honest. I'm usually pushing it hard and lack of sleep. And when I do sleep, it's in a drain pipe or something. Um, but cycling was always my favorite in the early days. Cycling's so cheap to do. You can go and buy a couple of £100 bicycle and probably get to Australia eventually. So it's definitely the most enjoyable doing a cycling based adventure, and I really urge anyone who hasn't done a cycling based adventure. And it doesn't have to be abroad. There's an amazing place to cycle in the UK. Just to go and buy a cheap bike on eBay or get one on Facebook Marketplace or whatever, and pack a rucksack with a sleeping bag and tent and just go out there. It's so easy and cheap to do.
Yeah. On your website, I noticed that I think it was your great uncle that helped Baden Powell start the Scouts.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Um, have you been a part of like the Scouts at all, or like growing up, or?
So yeah, well, the Scouts existed in South Africa where I went to school, but there was no Scout groups near where I grew up. So I actually, sadly, wasn't part of the Scouts. However, my school, because it was a farm school, had its own version of the Scouts. So
Yeah.
within our school, we could do badges and very similar to sort of things, making fires and tying knots and things like that. So I did a very similar thing, but it was just for my school only. But yeah, Scouts is such an important plays such an important role for the development of young people today. And I really urge everyone to sort of get into the Scouts. And actually, people are. In the UK, there's 60,000 people on Scout waiting lists in the UK.
Mm.
So it's because there's not enough volunteers.
Mm.
And we just need more volunteers because more kids are wanting to get into it. So if anyone's out there thinking of trying to volunteer or thinking, have a bit of spare time, I urge them to sort of look at giving the Scouts a bit of a hand in volunteering, because it's really worthwhile. I think it's really important.
Yeah, it's quite important, more so than ever at the moment. What's going on, right? So just kind of coming together and kind of just boost our morale and
Yeah,
also,
exactly.
yeah. And I also happened to notice that you ran the London Marathon with kind of like dressed as like a giant scout badge.
Yeah, that was. I wanted. I had, and to this day, that's the only official marathon I've ever run, the London Marathon. I've obviously done the distance before, but I've never actually entered a marathon race or event before. So I wanted to do it, but I wanted to do it a little bit more difficult. I wanted to make a thing of it and, make it harder for myself to just raise awareness for the Scouts. So yeah, we made this massive Scout badge, which I had to sort of carry, really. It was, and because it was bouncing on my shoulders, I had to run. Imagine trying to run, balancing a plate of drinks on your hand. You have to do that sort of shuffle. That's kind of what I was doing for the whole of the London Marathon. So it took me like 4.5 hours. So it's terribly slow, but yeah, it was worth it in the end.
Yeah. So is there any kind of like anything or any adventure or any place you'd like to go to in the future, or?
Oh, there's loads of places I want to go. Although COVID has really made me reevaluate, my priorities when it comes to travel and going abroad. And at the moment, I'm really enjoying doing stuff, local to my house. I'm currently doing what's called the 496 challenge, which is if you run 1 kilometer on the 1st of January and 2 kilometers on the 2nd, 3 kilometers on the 3rd, and so on, and finishing with obviously 31 kilometers at the end, you'll end up running 496 kilometers, which is it's a tough challenge, but kind of doable. Which is why I chose kilometers instead of miles. If it was miles, it would just be completely unachievable for many, many people, because it would be a full-time thing. To be doing 30 miles a day by the end it takes, you need to be a proper runner for that. Whereas kilometers, you can kind of imagine yourself doing it, because it's just a little bit more achievable. So I'm actually doing that. I'm on day 7 today. And on each run, I'm also doing something interesting, something exciting, or something new. So today I did a litter pick for one of them. I ran to the top of a hill yesterday. I'm just looking at my blackboard. I ran every street in my little village, which is quite fun as well. So just keeping things interesting local to me,
Yeah, I saw that you put that on your social media. That's one of the hills you ran up was covered in snow.
Yeah, it's great. I live in North Wales, and we right near the Clwydian Range, and so I can get to the top of Mo Vamai or Mole Arthur pretty easily,
Yeah. When you were younger, did you have like the opportunity to do like DV or 10 tours or?
No. Again, sadly not. I grew up in Africa in the middle of game reserves. My dad's a rhino and elephant conservationist, so we didn't really, that sort of stuff didn't really exist. But again, as I said, my school itself had its own kind of versions of those where you're encouraged to go off and do things. So yeah, it was a great African upbringings are so adventurous, and it's nice. It's nice. It's probably fueled that childhood fueled my adventurous spirit now, certainly.
Yeah. So, do you plan to do any more world records or?
Oh yeah. I'm 40 in April, so I'm getting quite good at the endurance stuff. The stuff that's a little bit longer and a bit slower. Like my pace has gone down a little bit, not much, a little bit, but I've got quite a few things up my sleeve.
So, kind of like the final bit. Do you have any like tips for anybody who wants to get out there and kind of push their limits, or?
Yeah, I always say this to people: just choose a goal and chase it relentlessly. So now, whatever it is, just choose it. Tell people, make it public. You need to be held accountable for this goal you want to do. Whatever it is, getting a PB, whatever, and then find something to chase and just start small. Like this January challenge of mine, on day one, I ran 1 kilometer, then day two, 2 kilometers, and you build it up. I think people want to get to the top of the mountain straight away rather than having to, pack their bag at the bottom and set the foundations. And
Yeah.
we all do that, right? But I think, start small and just do it, and just find something to chase and go and chase it with everything you've got. That's my advice.
So that kind of like the final question I wanted to ask. Was there anything else you kind of wanted to add or ask me, or?
No. I just want to say, everyone, January's the time to get outside and get outdoors, and please, try and spend the next 30 days of your life doing something outdoors, and I think you'll really notice a difference. So yeah.
So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I always feel honored when I get asked to do podcasts and things like that. So yeah, it's great. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, that's fine.
Cool. Well, have a good one. And